I would like to invite Dr. Huda Dougi to come forward to the stage now to introduce the kind of main show for the second part. Dr. Abdul Khal and Dr. Dougi is going to discuss Dr. Azad's new book, and then I think at the very end we will have another musical show, this time with singing, which I'm very excited about.
For the root, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Azad's newly published book, and I don't know why they have chosen me to take this opportunity, but I was quite impressed. I mean, Mr. Azad has been prolific writer, and he's also a very good speaker, and all over social media you can see him, and everybody's following him, talking to him, and they want to share and get insight into his mind and what he has achieved so far in the last probably 25 years while living in exile. So I don't have to say much about Abdul Khal, since all of us know him quite well, but I would like to speak about the recently published book, which is called, the title of the book, غیر متمرکزی سازی کشور در چارچوب و علتهای موجود بر بنیاد عدالت شهروندی و توازن اجتماع, which is in English, Decentralizing Afghanistan within its existing provinces based on civil justice and social balance. The book has been published this year, and it's also called a scientific or scholarly practical solution to Afghanistan's ethnic and cultural crisis. When we learn from the title of the book, it's already telling the story. Unfortunately, until today, there is no comprehensive roadmap about a trans-ethnic national narrative based on citizen rights, which is fundamental for any country in the world, especially Afghanistan, which is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society. The work is the outcome of a conference called Solution to the Ethnic Crisis and the Basic Problem of the Country, which also has the title The Peace and Freedom Movement, hosted in Frankfurt this year, 11th of May. As Ustad Azad states, the motivation behind writing this book stems from the constructive criticism, questions, and suggestions he received from friends and enthusiasts. Therefore, as he argued, quote, their input has significantly guided the revision and expansion of my initial plan, end of quote. In his book, Mr. Azad has included many analytical and comparative materials, particularly with respect to the political structure of several relatively democratic countries, as well as insights of various academic works. Thus, the main objective of this revision is to address a critical question. If centralized, federal, or separatist structure are not suitable for our people and our country, what alternative options could be both practical and rational? Additionally, to what extent does this proposed plan align with scholarly criteria and the indigenous requirement of the people of Afghanistan? The book further argues that about 140 years ago, a centralized, monoethnic, and authoritarian system was established in the diverse ethnic, linguistic, and cultural landscape of our homeland. This system has led to a monopoly on power, as well as discrimination based on ethnicity, language, culture, gender, and religion, leading to collective repression. The consequences of this structure have included widespread poverty and stagnation, ongoing political tensions, repeated government collapses, and the breakdown of political system. The painful experiences of the past, combined with the current deep political and ethnic crisis, highlight the urgent need to rethink the political structure and governance methods. For this purpose, as I was reviewing the book, I was also thinking of some theoretical background, somehow to help the reader better understand, or in particular for this presentation. So, through theoretical literature, to raise awareness of also what the other countries went through during their transitions. So this work by Julian Linz and Alfred Stefan has particularly been very helpful to apply to the current political situation or context of post-colonial, post-Soviet countries, including Afghanistan. Both of these scholars, who are respected in political science for their very right theoretical argument, have argued that in post-independent countries, the stateless issue has become one of the major concerns for the elite. In this context, stateless issue refers to the question of the coincidence between the territory of the state and national identity of those who live in that geographical territory. This study demonstrates that the issue of stateless arises when politicians and identities in heterogeneous societies like post-colonial countries try to promote and impose the culture of the dominant ethnia, such as in Afghanistan, Pashtun nationalism upon the rest of the society. This has become a constant resource for politicians and nationalists to evoke in people's desire for lost territory and concern about suppression of their co-ethnics outside their state borders. And the current situation of Afghanistan is such that for Pashtun nationalists it is more important the territory or their co-ethnics living inside modern Pakistan, while they have also Tajiks and Uzbeks who are living inside Afghanistan, but they have also, or they could have done similar claim on the territory or the borders, which obviously delegitimizes the current borders of Afghanistan. However, they are not really concerned about it, and elite is usually very selfish in these claims, and they do not take into consideration other people, other ethnic or religious minorities' concern. So therefore, these two scholars, Linz and Stefan, argue that the stateless issue can arise as a result of some objective measures by the elite to increase cultural homogeneity in a heterogeneous society. Following the disintegration of the Soviet Union into the 15 independent states, the issue of stateless has been seen closely related to their transition process. The presence of the stateless issue came to have a negative impact in the prospect of democratic transition. Linz and Stefan have discussed this in depth, arguing that, quote, some ways of dealing with the problems of stateless are inherently incompatible with democracy. And as we can see, this was, one of the examples was Afghanistan. For 2 decades, the entire Western coalition was there, but they were not, they didn't succeed because of this ethno-nationalist policy run by the state or the leaders of the country. So their work stands as a major contribution to the literature of post-colonial and post-communist transition areas, particularly on the issue of stateless. Therefore, both of these scholars, looking at their examples, it will show elite that they have become very concerned about their stateless, territorial integrity of their country. Therefore, they forcefully impose one identity upon others. The elites argue that authoritarian rule is the only means by which the stateless of their nation can be preserved. But there is also a clear personal benefit of the elites. Apart from what they're using as a nationalism, as an ideology to maintain their power and authority over the country, but also they have a profit out of it. And you have seen it, I don't have to name it, but most of these elites in Afghanistan, unfortunately, were more concerned about their personal benefit and profits rather than about the life of thousands or millions of Afghanis. So, for this reason,
I had a brief chat with Professor Lalzot, and he also invited me to look at another article which was published recently, and it has also identified several factors which are affecting current political situation in Afghanistan. So I will just briefly read these 4 points to make it more clear and probably provide a platform for further discussion around this topic. So the article was Zarurati Guzar as Guftamoni Qawi wa Guftamoni Shahwandi, or in English it reads the necessity of transitioning from ethnic discourse to citizenship discourse. This article will emphasize or insist that discrimination and inclusion are not only unjust, but also erode trust, and social cohesion of society will be destroyed. And this is something obviously elite or established institutions have to care more, but unfortunately in the case of Afghanistan it was a failure, total disaster. Afghanistan has always been plagued by crises of structural justice and monopoly of power over the past century. It is a country of twisted individuals who have been accused of being corrupt and monopolizing power. In such a context, the type of discourse prevalent among elites, politicians, and the public has played a determining role in the resolution of this circle of discrimination and injustice. This discourse, which is not only a reflection of the current discourse of justice and equality, is also seeking to present a new approach that has not yet been properly formulated in the intellectual and political space. This is the argument from the chapter. The main goal of this article is to fundamentally criticize the discourse of the talisman of justice and its consequences, and to explain the necessity and insufficiency of the discourse of justice. There are four parts of this chapter which are more important, and I briefly mention part 1. Diagnosis of the disease problem is equal to half of the cure relief. Since a doctor without the correct diagnosis cannot diagnose the disease, he is helpless, unprepared, and unable to give proper treatment for the patient. There are a few countries where ethnic, linguistic, religious, and other differences are not the only ones that are not addressed, but the political and social conflict and conflicts between the two countries have been the main cause of the rise of the tension and the conflict in the country. It's not the conflict just within Afghanistan between various ethnic groups, but also claim over neighboring territories. That's another major issue, which has never been addressed and probably will never be. Therefore, the current situation and instability in the country should be understood in the context of unjust process of state multi-conflict, or the problem of national unity, and the problem of the stateness, which was already discussed in our theoretical part. Part 2, the formation of national and anti-colonial nationalism in the second half of the 19th century, and the emergence of other movements are linked to such a pan-Turkism, pan-Islamism, pan-Iranism, gradually developing into nationalist ideology or pan-Afghanism, which later evolved into Pashtunism. As a student of Marxism, we all know well that the division of the masses into class oppressions, class struggle, elite, ruling elite were part of the same narrative, and divide and rule or divide and conquer policy of imperialism. This is something which always has been neglected, obviously, in our discourse. Part 3, everyday nationalism, which is ethnic-based, and one of the key questions that confronts us every day, and that's the effect of the discourse of justice, the struggle for independence, and the struggle for self-determination. Why do Tajiks, Hazaras, and Uzbek intellectuals actively have been denied in the ethnic structure of sovereignty established in post-Taliban, and And even though they have been given certain positions, but they never were actually a main actor to play a serious role to establish this, to challenge the dominance of one ethnic group. Because a large part of the Pashtun intellectuals still do not know how to choose a path of self-determination. This situation arises from the historical perspective, a fear crisis of identity. The Pashtuns believe that if they lose political power, their language, identity, and historical role will be lost. The only way to preserve it is to destroy others before they destroy them. So the section 4, the last one, and finally, the solution to a problem is to find a solution to a problem, but to realize the unfulfilled aspiration. It requires a combination of determination, hard work, historical precedent, and determination to reform the power structure, political system, regimes which came one after another and ending with a collapse and creating chaos and ruining the life of millions of Afghanistani people. And yeah, it goes on, but I'm just stopping here because I was asked not to do too much, and without any further ado, I will give the stage for Professor Lazo to